The Embassy of Morocco in South Africa decided to share this podcast because we believe that relevant and accurate information should be provided to each and everyone, so to understand the roots, the dynamics, and the prospects of this regional dispute, which is exclusively dealt with within the UN Security Council. The Sahara issue is not for Morocco a mere item on the agenda of the UN Security Council. It rather represents a historical injustice done to Morocco in the recovery of its territorial integrity. It is indeed a matter linked to the dignity and sovereignty of the Moroccan people. Many misconceptions persist regarding this issue. Outdated ideologies, political manipulation, and irrelevant concepts often mislead public opinions. We believe that these messages need to be tackled and addressed seriously, since their first intention is to enshrine false allegations and blatant untruths. It is important to understand the real dynamics on the ground, since the separatist movement of the Polisario has recently shown to the world its violent nature by threatening to breach the ceasefire in place since 1991 and calling for an open war. The Polisario armed militias are not showing any will or commitment to move forward in the UN-led political process to which Morocco remains fully committed. As an example, Algeria and Polisario are still calling today for a referendum, while the international community, the UN Secretary General, and the UN Security Council have explicitly and since more than 2 decades buried the referendum as an option that could solve this regional dispute by calling instead the parties to work together towards a political, realistic, and sustainable solution based on compromise. I hope that this following podcast that we are sharing with you will help you to get a brighter understanding of what is really going on the time where many countries have opened consulates in Laayoune and Dakhla in the Moroccan Sahara, and the USA has just recognized Morocco's sovereignty over the entire Saharan territory through a proclamation from the President of the United States of America.
Considered among the most important countries on the continent, Morocco is most certainly one of those stakeholders whose actions and engagements contribute to shaping the future of Africa. One of the most popular destinations, Morocco is a country of diversity, fantastic cuisine, and spectacular landscapes. While known for its outstanding culture, the kingdom is, however, subjected to some political controversy when it comes to addressing the Sahara issue. Many misperceptions remain very strong in some people's understanding of this issue, especially in the southern region of our continent. Now, one can only assume that outdated information regarding the Sahara issue persists in our region, given that this regional dispute is taking place thousands of kilometers away from us. It is therefore with great pleasure that we welcome the newly appointed High-Level Ambassador of Morocco to South Africa, Youssef Amrani, to give us deeper insights and a broad understanding of the issue. Now, Ambassador Amrani is a seasoned diplomat who has been ambassador to Colombia, to Mexico and Chile, as well as the Secretary General for the Mediterranean Union. Now, Youssef Amrani then also assumed the function of Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Morocco. Ambassador Amrani will provide us with some clear answers to frequently asked questions regarding the Sahara issue. Video footage will then be shared via social media and digital platforms on a regular basis to ensure that you get a global understanding of what is really going on. Sahara is often referred to as Africa's last colony. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the Sahara is indeed the last colony in Africa?
Thank you for the question. The assumption that the Sahara is the last colony in Africa is without substance and derives from ignorance. This misconception lacks legal, historical, and political foundation. It is completely at odds with the reality as established at the United Nations that exclusively deals with this regional dispute. Let's not forget that at the legal level, there are around 70 resolutions of the UN Security Council and 120 reports of the UN Secretary General on this dispute. None of them ever referred to Morocco as an occupying power, nor do they refer to the Sahara as a colony or an occupied territory. The systematic reference to the so-called occupation is totally inaccurate and represents a political and an ideological opinion with no legal basis. Let's be clear. From a historical perspective, prior to the colonial era, the Sahara has always been a part of Morocco. Several bilateral treaties signed in the 18th and in the 19th centuries attest to this reality. The International Court of Justice recognized unanimously on October 1975 the existence of bonds of allegiance between the kings of Morocco and the tribes living in the territory. For more than 12 centuries, Morocco was a fully sovereign and independent nation prior to its occupation by different European powers, namely France at the center of Morocco, Spain at the north and the south, and Tangier, which was an international zone.
So Morocco itself was colonized, and it of course remained a colony until 1956. Could you take me through the decolonization process of Morocco and how that was undertaken?
Well, the decolonization process was exceptional and achieved gradually through negotiations that led to the independence of Morocco in 1956. It is to be recalled that in June 1962, Morocco addressed an official request to the UN Decolonization Committee calling on Spain to start peaceful negotiations over the remaining territories of Sidi Ifni and the Sahara. No other country objected to the Moroccan claim, and this was before the creation of the separatist armed group of Polisario. And as a matter of fact, Morocco was finally able to recuperate in 1969 Sidi Ifni and subsequently the Sahara in 1975 through the Madrid Agreement, which is today registered within the United Nations. The retrocession of these territories to Morocco was the result of negotiations with Spain that are well documented and that fully dismiss the myth of the last colony in Africa.
Would you say that the Sahara is a decolonization issue?
Not at all. The regional dispute over the Sahara is not about decolonization, but about the territorial integrity of Morocco. You cannot decolonize what is not a colony. So those who falsely claim that Morocco is a colonizer are also attempting to rewrite history. I would like you to consider these few historical facts that highlights the role of Morocco in the fight against colonization and apartheid in Africa. 1. It is Morocco that hosted in 1960 the famous Conference of Casablanca, attended by leaders of the liberation movement such as King Mohammed V of Morocco, the President Nkrumah of Ghana, Modibo Keita of Mali, and Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea. These are the founding fathers of the Organization of the African Unity. 2. It is Morocco that also hosted in April 1961 the Conference of Support to the Liberation Movement of the territories under Portuguese colonization. 3. It was from Morocco that the huge solidarity movement was launched to support the neighboring Algeria struggle for independence. And 4. it is Morocco, among other countries, that provided Nelson Mandela with assistance, training, funds and weapons to support the ANC armed struggle against apartheid.
Now, there are some allegations about Morocco looting natural resources. What are your views on these allegations?
Thank you. Morocco is not exploiting natural resources in the Sahara. Facts and figures speak to the contrary. For every $1 extracted from the region, the central government of Morocco has reinvested 7. The Sahara region is not phosphate rich, not fertile for agriculture. It contains only 1.6% of Morocco's known phosphate reserve, and its fertile land for agriculture represents only 1.2%. So Moroccan total capacities for the past decades, the economic and social development of the Sahara has been a priority for Morocco. Our major objective being to boost local economies, consolidate social cohesion, and fight poverty. The resulting benefits of this approach are today outstanding. The region has experienced real economic progress. Elected bodies in the southern provinces of the Moroccan Sahara have the total capacity and ability to manage and budget democratically their respective affairs. In this regard, increased powers were granted through our constitution and national laws to the regions, especially in the management of local natural resources and investment projects, aiming to achieve prosperity and equitable benefit. And at the heart of the new model of development that today is implemented in the southern provinces are the respect and promotion of basic human rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights. Let me be clear. The main aim of the policy conducted in the region is to provide direct benefits to the inhabitants of the southern province of Morocco. And in line with this policy, the European Union, one of our major partners, approved in 2019 the revision of 2 EU-Morocco trade agreements related to agriculture and fisheries. And it is important to note that the last regional elections in the southern provinces, which were monitored by international observers and confirmed as free and fair, witnessed the highest voter turnout nationally, 79%. All these efforts and results highlight that local democracy is in action.
Now, for many years, there's been talks of a referendum, which to date has not seen the light of day. Would you say that said referendum could still be a valid option to solve this long-standing dispute?
It is important to dissipate some of the misconceptions when it comes to the use of a referendum in the resolution of territorial disputes. I want to make 3 main observations, if you allow me. 1, the referendum mechanism is not mentioned in any basic text of the United Nations concerning self-determination, nor does the UN Charter evoke it either. 2, the UN General Assembly identifies 4 equal and distinct solutions of self-determination, which are the independence, the association, the integration, and any other political status freely agreed without any mention of the mechanisms that has to lead to the advocate solutions. 3, the referendum is not a mandatory or unique way to achieve self-determinations. And since 1945, out of 64 cases of territorial disputes, the UN has only resolved 3 cases through referendum. The rest were resolved by political negotiations.
Is it true that Morocco was the first to propose the organization of a referendum?
Yes. Regarding the Sahara dispute, it is worth recalling that Morocco first proposed in 1981 the organization of a referendum during the OAU summit in Nairobi. And at that time, I was in that meeting, and late King Hassan II made this proposal. Its implementation was, however, hampered and blocked the following year, when the Secretary General of the OAU at that time prejudged the outcome of the referendum by illegally admitting an entity that lacks the attributes of sovereignty, violating thus the charter of the organization. Despite this unfortunate decision, Morocco held on the notion of a referendum and sought the UN assistance in this regard. And in 1991, the UN brokered a ceasefire and established a peacekeeping mission known as MINUSO, whose mandate was at that time to monitor the ceasefire and to organize a referendum on the future of the region.
Now, why is it that the UN was not able to organize a referendum?
Well, for more than a decade, the UN tried to organize this referendum, but failed because the parties could not agree on a voter list and also on the eligibility of the voters. This deadlock led to the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000 to recognize the inapplicability of the referendum and called instead the parties to work together towards a political solution to this regional dispute. Ever since, the Security Council has urged the parties to reach a mutually acceptable political solution to the conflict. Not a single UN Security Council resolution in the past 20 years has called on the parties to organize a referendum.
Now, Ambassador, we could talk all day long about what the long-standing issues are, what could have been done, what should have been done, but perhaps it would be a more productive use of our time to channel our energies towards solutions. So what would you say is the way forward to solve the Sahara issue?
Well, following the assessment of the inapplicability of a referendum by Kofi Annan 20 years ago, the UN Security Council has been calling parties to reach a political solution to this regional dispute. And subsequent resolution dropped any explicit reference to the referendum. In response of numerous calls of African countries and the UN, Morocco presented to the UN in 2007 the Moroccan Initiative for Negotiating an Autonomy Statute for the Sahara region as compromise that could facilitate the opening of negotiation for this just, durable, and peaceful political solution. This plan provides broad outlines of an autonomy arrangement for the Sahara and the Moroccan sovereignty, including a description of areas of local and shared powers for the region with the central government. The initiative states that in the future, specific arrangement should result from negotiations between all parties.
Now, I'm glad that you've already touched on the autonomy plan. Could you please just elaborate a bit more on what that is?
Yes, the autonomy plan is a win-win solution and represents a realistic and pragmatic way forward to ending this long-standing regional dispute. This proposal, and I want to insist on this, brings hope for a better future for the entire population of the region, ends the separation, and promotes reconciliation. It is consistent with international law and the UN Charter. It also respects the right of self-determination and the resolution of the Security Council on this matter. It is to be recalled that this Moroccan autonomy plan was endorsed by an overwhelming majority of African and international countries and remains the only proposal on the table. So since 2000, 7. All the 16 UN Security Council resolutions have begged and supported this Moroccan approach by highlighting the preeminence of the autonomy plan. And also, it is to be recalled that after the presentation of the Moroccan autonomy plan, Mr. Peter van Vansum, who was the UN Secretary General Personal Envoy, issued a frank assessment in 2008 to the Security Council that an independent state in the Sahara is not an attainable goal, and urged the Security Council to pursue the only realistic compromise political solution to the conflict, autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty.
Now, what are the fundamentals of the ongoing UN dynamic?
Well, this dynamic has been comforted by many UN Security Council resolutions. In its resolution 2494 of October 2019, the UN Security Council reaffirmed the parameters of the political solution and welcomed this positive momentum in the political process. The Security Council highlighted 5 elements. The first one is that the Geneva Roundtables meeting, which brought along Morocco, Algeria, Mauritania, and the Polisario, is the only framework to reaching a political solution. 2, the mandate of this process is very clear, namely to achieve a realistic, a practicable, and enduring political solution on compromise. 3, Algeria should engage and commit seriously in this process as a party to this regional dispute. 4, the preeminence of the Moroccan Autonomy Initiative, which is qualified serious and credible, was highlighted. 5, the urgent need to register the Tindoufkan population. And finally, in order to ensure a successful outcome, the Security Council calls all the participants to the roundtable process to remain engaged in a spirit of realism and compromise to reach a political solution.
Now, another allegation that arises is that of human rights violations. So how do you respond to these claims of human rights violation in the Sahara?
Well, let me first say that Morocco has a very positive track record on the region when it comes to human rights. The reforms we have undertaken in our country are well known and globally recognized. Civil liberties, including freedom of speech, press gathering, association, and gender equality are fully today enshrined in our constitution. Important measures, actions, and reforms have been initiated in order to guarantee the respect of human rights in various fields of civil, political, economical, social, and cultural life. The UN Human Rights Committee has ranked Morocco among the top 5 countries successfully implementing UN recommendations on the protection of human rights. And we are in South Africa, the former United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, South African Navi Pillay, confirmed that Morocco is setting up high standards through its constitution and laws. It is therefore completely unfounded that Morocco is abusing human rights. We are at the forefront of international human rights, consolidating the rule of law, independence of the judiciary, freedom of press, and strengthening human rights on the entire Moroccan territory with no exception.
So would you then say that Morocco is complying with international human rights standards?
Yes, Morocco has issued a standing invitation to all special reporters of the Human Rights Council to visit Morocco and its Saharan provinces. We have hosted, with no restriction, 12 of such special procedures, attended by journalists, experts, activists, and other concerned stakeholders. Morocco has nothing to hide, and we have no complexes or taboos regarding human rights issues. It is today in our DNA, in our culture. We have strengthened our instruments through the National Human Rights Council, the CNDH, with enlarged investigation and monitoring powers. We have received a status rating which confirmed that CNDH is in full compliance with the Paris Principles and international standards adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1993. So the Council's 13 regional human rights commissions, of which 2 are in the Sahara region, in Laayoune and Dakhla, are fully operational. The UN Security Council praised the work of these 2 regional commissions.
And maybe while we're on the topic of human rights, what is your assessment on the humanitarian situation in the Tindouf camps in Algeria?
Well, the human rights violations by the Polisario in the Tindouf camps in Algeria have been ongoing since the first camps were set up more than 40 years ago. Systematically, abuses have increased. Thousands of Sahara will remain trapped in desperate conditions with no freedom of speech or association, no free movement, no right to education, and no right to work. And all this in flagrant violation of the international humanitarian law. Access to the camps by human rights monitors is limited to strict visa requirements by Algeria. Algeria and the Polisario constantly refuse and hampers any action of the UN to conduct a census. Many independent and highly recognized bodies report that the Polisario and Algeria officials divert food and intend, which is aid intended for camp population to the black market. The report released by the European Union Anti-Fraud Office, OLAF, confirms this unacceptable reality. Lately, only I think a few weeks ago, the European Parliament Committee on Development officially took up the case of the embezzlement of humanitarian aid intended for the population sequestered in the Tindouf camps. So few people realize that this is the only refugee camp in the world where the UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, has not been allowed to do its job. The absence of a clear legal framework governing the condition of the population of Tindouf is an exceptional, unprecedented situation in international law. The Polisario has no legitimacy to represent the people living in the Sahara. The majority of the people that the Polisario claim to represent are living in the southern provinces of Morocco, where they fully enjoy their rights and their life. Moreover, the civilian population in Tindouf is prevented from free movement and the right to return to Morocco or settle in other parts of the Algerian territory or third country. This constitutes a very serious, flagrant, and important violation of the 1951 Geneva Refugee Convention and its 1967 protocol.
Why is it that Morocco is insisting on the conducting of a census?
It is not only Morocco, but the entire international community and the Security Council who are calling consistently for the conduct of a census. It is now high time for the international community to stand up and request that clear answers be provided to the following key questions. 1. How many people are today living in the Tindouf camps? 2. What is the will of those people? 3. Do they want to stay where they are or move elsewhere? 4. And it's a key question also, where have the millions of euros in the form of humanitarian aid gone? Facts are facts. A census of the population would have provided clear answers. Yet, unfortunately, a census remains elusive and blocked despite several appeals by the UN Security Council and the EU, which is one of the biggest donors to the camps, and also others, partners and NGOs. Let's ask 3 questions for all of us. And I believe that this question must be addressed urgently. 1, what is that some parties want to hide from the international community? 2, it is also a key question, can Algeria continue to outsource the protection of human rights on its own territory? And 3, how does it come that a country, namely Algeria, accepts to hand over its international responsibilities to an armed group? This non-state entity, which is not recognized by the UN, does not subscribe to any international obligation, and thus it is not accountable before the international community.
Now, Morocco left the OAU, as it were, back then. So what motivated Morocco's subsequent return to the now AU?
Morocco is a founding member of the African Union. The spirit of Pan-Africanism has always been in our DNA and at the heart of our foreign policy. From the Casablanca Conference in 1960 to our reintegration into the African Union in 2017, this spirit has never faded nor lost its significance or substance. Africa is at the heart of the Moroccan identity because we are not only African by geography, but also by history, human, economic, and religious ties. The objective, and thank you for the question, of our return is to join efforts with our brothers and sisters in the African Union to promote progress and development in the continent. Our efforts are in line with today's clearly defined priority within the continent, which is building up strong economies, combating inequalities and social disparities, and promoting regional integration and inclusive growth. It is this ambition that is at the very heart of the vision carried by His Majesty King Mohammed VI for an African continent that resolutely moves forward in order to achieve our common ambition of an audacious, secure, prosperous, and peaceful Africa.
Perhaps you could shed some light on why that decision was taken to leave the OAU.
Well, Morocco left the organization of the African Union in November 1984 because the charter of the institution had been violated by accepting an entity which lacks attributes of sovereignty, and this action was prejudging the result of the referendum. But even after leaving the OAU, we remained very close to our African friends and allies. All of them were urging Morocco to return and regain its natural and legitimate seat within the African family. So the return of Morocco to the African Union is therefore a strong commitment in favor of South-South cooperation and a win-win partnership.
Now, it's no secret that the Maghreb is probably the least integrated region in Africa. Why is that?
Yes, today the Maghreb region is the least integrated region in Africa. This sad reality is a consequence of the lack of ambition, the lack of leadership, and the lack of commitment to build up a coherent regional scheme. The non-Maghreb is an economic mess, is a political handicap, and a historical aberration. It becomes today more than ever necessary to overcome these existing deadlocks. You will agree with me that the cost of the non-Maghreb is not longer affordable. economically, politically, or socially. And facts and figures are clear. The delay in the Maghreb integration process costs each country in the region at least 2.8% of its annual growth rate. So the key question that we have to ask to ourselves is how we do now transform our shared aspiration into a concrete regional dynamic leading to economic integration, stability, and security, as well, of course, shared prosperity.
And how can the Maghreb play its role and effectively contribute to the development of the region?
Thank you. Political dialogue between countries, as well as economic integration, free trade, interconnection of networks in the Maghreb would not only contribute to the stability of the Saharan region, which is today a major security threat for all of us, but also to the north along the Mediterranean, faced today with deep challenges such as migration, terrorism, climate change, etc. So today the conclusion is evident. The Maghreb is a necessity. It represents a strategic and a political ambition for all the Maghreb countries. It reflects an economic prerequisite that will allow the creation of a common market and a strong competitive pole of 100 million people. So we countries of the Maghreb have to turn the pages of ideological positions and work together to overcome our differences and build up a common future based on shared prosperity and common values. The result, I'm sure, will be outstanding, not only for us, country of the Maghreb, but for the whole entire region, EU, Africa, and so on.